Hey, Dental Nachos crew, this is Paul, Dr. Nacho. We are sponsored today by Dentist Job Connect, helping you find the dentisting job of your dreams, or at least preventing you from finding one of your nightmares. This is for us to talk about why finding a job in dentistry is a lot like dating, but way more difficult and a lot more serious because your rent depends on it. So my first guest is the awesome Erica Spera, who is the second most famous person in our group because her dad, Sonny Spera, is one of our awesome Nachoers. We'll talk about him in a minute. So we're so thrilled to have Erica here because she is an expert on dating through experience. She runs a podcast. She's going to tell us all about it. So welcome to Talking Nachos, Erica. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Oh, our pleasure. Now, share with us, I like people's why and why they do things. You know, one of the reasons I'm doing Dentist Job Connect is because dentists go to school, they take out $300,000, $400,000, $600,000 in debt, and then they need a job afterwards. And the dental culture is one of a lot of competence, but always filling out the next application. And there's no application to the real world, right? Apply to college, apply to dental school, apply to residency. But now you're out in the real world, the Wild West, it's tough. And then awesome dentists like your dad need associates, so we connect them. That's part of my why for this. So share with us your why for your podcast and a little bit of your background.
So a little bit of my background. I'm a kid of a dentist. Originally was going to be a dentist, and then I bailed on it to be a stand-up comedian, actually. So I'd say dating is similar to kind of job hunting in any sense, because it's like, well, for women especially, it's very weird of like, you have to go after what you want in life in order to get it. But then when it comes to dating, you're told to sit back and not initiate. Right. And so me and my co-host were kind of like, screw that. That's not who we are. We're going to try to make something happen. Dating, applying for jobs is a lot of tryouts.
Yeah, I like that. Well, I'm kind of known as a little bit of this Mr. Rogers character on my Nachos group. Does not mean I do not use language in my personal life that people don't hear. So I don't mind if we go off script. I have a little bit of a background in stand-up comedy. I love stand-up comedy. So this book you guys read, which I've listened to some of the episodes, is what is it? Why Women Need to Be Bitches More or something?
Well, that's one of the books we did. It's called Why Men Love Bitches.
Why Men Love Bitches.
Yeah, and it's all about rebranding the word bitch. It's like a bitch
love
is
that.
Just someone that stands up for what they want, and it's not that they're mean, but the world classifies being a bitch as being mean.
And I think that's so true. There's another thing I talk about with dentists, because I'm into communication. Dentists do not feel comfortable when I say you have to sell a lot of dentistry. But if I say, oh, you have to share what you do and your value, they love that, right? And that's why we're rebranding Sell. And To Sell is Human is a great book I just read by Daniel Pink. It's great for any human to sell as human, because he talks about reframing, recentering those expectations. So you and your co-host started this podcast. Tell us a little, first, my grandmother did say I was the most interesting person ever, Erica, but I produce a lot of stuff. So if someone just stopped watching in now or listening in now, how would they find out more about your podcast?
You could check out our website, or shootersgottashoot.com. Or our Instagram, Shooters Gotta Shoot Pod. We have a bunch of clips on there and on our YouTube. Essentially, we take advice that is written by professionals and we kind of decipher it, and we'll even try out certain things they say and challenges they'll give you, and we report back of this is what we like, this is what we didn't like. But essentially, I guess a way a bad doctor could prey on people. Yeah. A lot of these books we feel are just preying on people that feel lonely.
Right. Yeah, no, that's such a good point. I have this book near me, which I think all the time I tell dentists, the Checklist Manifesto. And I was listening to an episode this morning on the Peloton when dads get up at 5 a.m. And, your co-host was saying, you had asked her a really good point. I have two books here for dentists that I always have, the Checklist Manifesto and the E-Myth Revisited. And I know you have a background in this. I also have a basketball because my goal is to play in the NBA. And I can't palm a basketball. This is my daughter's basketball. But rebranding and, what do you learn from books? And I think you asked your co-host, Molly, did it help her? She now has a relationship. And she said, it wasn't like I was thinking about the book in the moment when I was dating. But what did she say? She said that it helped her sort of build up either better dating fundamentals, did she say, or sharing? Tell us some more about that.
Well, I think that in both ways, it's you kind of make your own set of rules and standards and things that matter to you. You kind of learn red flags on people from, dating someone that had that red flag and you didn't see it the first time.
And I love you brought up red flags, because red flags are something we're going to talk about with jobs too. And I think Molly said something on a podcast that, people had told her that she had a very similar personality type, not a physical type, but a personality type that led her to some not being successful, right? And a lot of it is communication. So I just think it's awesome that you guys, so Shooters Gotta Shoot Pod, and you have a website, ericaspera.com, right? Is that yours?
It's my personal website.
Awesome, because I always find dig down deeper. And there's a lot of people watching this right now who both would like to learn how to date and find a job. So I would say do the work while you're doing the work. So we're doing it both. So let's talk a little bit about pandemic communication, whether it's with dating or finding a job. Share with me, because I'm really curious. I've been married since 2012. I have 2 awesome daughters, but I've been out of this game, right? So I do have to communicate online for my business, but how are people actually communicating during a pandemic for dating? How has that changed?
I mean, it's like it's changed and it's not changed, because a lot of people were already predominantly using online dating, because it's like, it's like a bar on crack. You're like, okay, everyone here is supposed to be single.
Right. Yes.
You've come across people that you're like, turns out this person is not.
Right.
But I feel like in both ways, like if you're applying to a job or trying to date, you have to figure out like what your standards are and stick to them. And something like this pandemic kind of makes it harder to do that.
Right.
And you feel like, whether you lost your job for whatever you're doing right now, or say your business is down, it's like you're trying to be like, how do I keep my standard and then not essentially go to methods that are like desperate and don't make you feel good, and especially when you're applying to jobs, it is very hard because you kind of have this feeling of like, well, what if I don't get another job? And a lot of people feel that in relationships.
Right, for sure.
Or like, well, what if I don't meet another person? Like, I should try to make it work with this one.
I've seen that in both, but I always tell my dental followers that, it's worse for a job because, I'll try to use some up-to-date lingo. If you're dating someone, you don't like them, you could just ghost them and go back to your couch and Netflix, right? Nobody really gets hurt. Emotionally, you get hurt, but you don't get hurt financially. Your couch is great. Wine on your couch, Netflix, that's relaxing. But in a job, if you take a bad job, dental or otherwise, you're usually going to stay in it longer, because your rent and food is tied to this scenario, which might not be that great. And that's why I try to help dentists look for red flags and spot red flags and give them questions to ask the same way you would with dating. My next question.
I was going to say how people are serial monogamous because they kind of go by the philosophy of like, don't quit your job till you have another job.
Right. Yes. Right.
Is often what people do in dating, which I would not advise.
Right. It's a good point. And that's why I think, and it probably fits for both. I tell dentists, and it might sound counterintuitive, but this is one of my golden nacho tips is it's better to have no job for a short period of time than take a bad job, because you're reluctant to get out of that bad job. And it might fit for relationships too. I'm not a relationship expert, but sometimes when you have a want, like a job or dating someone, and then you fill it with something that's not really a good fit, your want is different now. And then I think you've sometimes contaminated 2 big decisions in your life, who you're going to marry and how you're going to make money, or at least move forward to marrying. So I appreciate you sharing that. I have a question, because you're in this, not dating world personally, and also as someone who's talking about it and reading books. I said to my own wife, I said, I wonder if there's going to be like less children being born because of this pandemic, because are people like not moving forward, right? People who are dating, like, are they not moving forward? So tell me a little bit about like, I read an article yesterday that this reformed Playboy, he used to have a date every night of the week, and now he has to like be more serious. Are people more open to being serious quickly during a pandemic or not? I'm curious to learn about that.
I think relationships are going to move faster in one direction or the other. Because essentially, if you think about like, okay, technically every time I'm going on a date and meeting a new person, I'm technically putting myself at risk for COVID. Right. So you would like to think like people maybe are slowing down, but when it was like outdoor season, it didn't really feel like it, to be honest, in the city. But basically the pandemic has sped up relationships, but it seems like already in the direction they were going to go. So people I know that were already dating someone almost a year, like now have moved in because they basically were living together for a few months, kind of as a trial. But then the same for like, I knew people that were dating someone like 6 months, pandemic hit, and then they like the person didn't want to see them. Like they used that as a cutoff. Like they were like, I'd rather be alone in this pandemic than be around you 24/7. And you're like, oh, I guess this relationship was going nowhere. You should
journal all of this, because I think it's funny. A couple of things I think are funny is that, or document, because, it's become long distance, even if you're physically close to people. And I also think, you might be too young for the Seinfeld reference, but I think there's like a good Elaine Sponge joke in there, because, it's like, you're only going to go on dates. Like, I'm not going to risk COVID just for anybody. So it's like, they have to really prove themselves, I think. And I kind of get that even as someone who's not dating, but even going out of your home to do an activity has to be for a good reason, because I'm a big Curb Your Enthusiasm fan. And Larry David once says he doesn't ski because it's such a schlep, right? And like now they've made almost everything a schlep, right? I mean, it's like you got to get temperature check bouncer. You have to answer these questions, all these things. So I like that. So how about the technology we're using right now? I mean, I am a big fan. I have a great business coach, so lucky to have her. One of the most brilliant things she had said to me once was, everything in life, leading is about managing energy, right? Managing energy, parenting, coaching, playing sports, dating. And we can't feel this energy, right, when we're not with people. It's a different thing. So are people using like Zoom dates more often, Skype dates more often to feel like at least a face-to-face connection? Are you doing that with your dating life?
I did when it was like full lockdown. I did a couple FaceTime dates. And now that it's cold, I know people are kind of going back to doing FaceTime dates. Because essentially it's just so cold that like, you know, you're like, I'm not going to go to someone's apartment even amongst like this pandemic. But it's weird. Some things have shifted more old school. Like I know I actually just set up a friend of mine because he was complaining about using online dating. And I was like, well, I mean, I have girlfriends I'd set you up with. You're a nice guy. But I know a lot of people now that are openly saying to friends, like, hey, if you know anyone,
I like that
thing. So it's kind of like one way or the other. Either you're going full digital or you're kind of trying to just go through people you know, because the scenarios of like being in a bar are now taken away.
I mean, this fits our whole Dentist Job Connect platform, because I tell people, use online, use people that you know, use connectors. One of my favorite books, The Tipping Point, I'm a classic connector from Malcolm Gladwell. And, you know, I actually always connect people for stuff. But even back in the day, I remember this because, you know, I met my own wife on Match. That was like a rock and the stick match.com where like I mean, it was like quaint, right? There was no smartphones. You checked if you were having a date on your laptop. It was really relaxing. It was not like what I imagine it today. But I used to say, I don't want to set up anyone on dates with my friends because I'm going to disappoint two people after that instead of one. And so I was always a little reluctant-ish. But now I see this necessity because it's almost like you can kind of curate availability of people that you know. So I feel like it's kind of cool that you have this new age way of doing it mixed with this very classic way of kind of people have to prove themselves to you to be able to get a date with one of your friends. I like that. Let me ask you about apps right now, because one of the things I talk about with dentists is value. If something's free, you don't really value it. You pay for it. Maybe you could just actually list it and show someone like, what are the dating apps out there that people can use? What's free and what's not free? And do you pay for any or do you only use free ones?
So pretty much all of them are free.
Nice. And
if anything, it's interesting you say that you'll pay for it. It's better quality. But I kind of have a theory of like, when you pay for the apps now, you get like unlimited likes, right? Unlimited swipe rights, unlimited matches. And like the people never run out. It's kind of the theory.
Yeah.
And I actually think that's worse because it's so easy to like, every time you go on it, just swipe because it's kind of this like fun game. And then you'll like go and look at your messages. And a lot of times you open messages and you're like, I'm too tired. I don't really want to message people right now. But you like browsing, you know? It's like there's Hinge, there's Tinder, there's Bumble, are kind of the three big main ones. There's one called Shipped that actually your friends make profiles and they swipe for you.
Wow.
So that one, the theory is like, your friends probably can pick people better for you.
I think that's funny. You could do like a split test of that. Like I actually do say a lot of times dentists are not qualified to make their own decisions in their life because what they choose is to their own disadvantage. And if they outsourced a lot of their business decisions and leadership decisions, they'd be better. So maybe you could do a split test of like 3 months trying myself, living in my own brain or giving it to someone else. I think that's cool. So Hinge, Bumble, Shipped. I mean, I think what's interesting, and I'm sure like, this has happened with every generation, but you told a story in the podcast that I thought was good where you went on a bad date, but you were already dressed up and you were out. So you went and met some other people, right?
Which I think just went to stop to get a drink by myself.
Yeah, you stopped to get a drink by yourself, and then you met some people in your neighborhood. You said, now you could have a rooftop place, which I think represents a lot of cool things, right? But I also think it represents some of the times where like we're not willing to sometimes like work things out. And that happens with dental jobs too. And I'm not saying you should have worked out with a specific one bad date, but I remember like if you were dating in the early 2000s or late or 2010, like this was your one thing. There was no other options. And I'm not even talking about for socialization because you would call people. And if you've committed to a date, there was no way to get to this other place unless your friend said, maybe we're hanging out at this bar, Lucy's, where I used to work. So I think that comes with like a double-edged sword. Great for extra stuff to do, but also if people who use online dating, and I can get it, it's people become disposable might be a harsh way to say it, but like, how about talk a little about that? Like, and from your books, like, where do you start? Where do you work things out more versus discarding versus realizing it's a red flag?
Okay. You asked like 4 questions at once.
Yeah, I do that a lot.
Okay.
It's not easy working around me.
This happens every question.
Just pick one and answer them. This happens all the time.
I have to say something about energy. Okay, apps in general, basically, you have to look at it as like they're introducers, right?
Yeah.
They're just basically going to introduce you to someone. It doesn't mean it's going to work. It doesn't mean it's not going to work, right? So a lot of people put too much investment into it or too much stress on it, you know? And again, with energy, it's like I go through swings all the time. I'll do the app for 3 months and then I get tired and I go, I'm going to take a break. And I just delete it off my phone, like restart, because when I go back, I have to remake the whole profile.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, you got to really want to do this.
I like
not
that.
half-ass it, right? Sorry, I don't know if I could swear on
You
that.
could curse. It's a special episode with you. Sonny Sarah's daughter can do whatever she wants here. Not anyone else in this group, just Sonny's daughter. That's it.
Yeah. I was like, I would think all the dentists in this group are adults. And then another similarity is like dating is like job interviews, where like when you haven't gone on a first date in a long time, you feel rusty. You're not really sure what to talk about, what questions to ask. Like you have this like jitters. And the same goes for interviews. Like a lot of times, if you're starting to interview for jobs, do you get the first one you interview for? No,
right?
Not usually. You're kind of going in, you're feeling it out, like, and you often have to go on a lot of interviews to find the job for you. And then
Which I think also represents, it's a good point, Erica. It's like, especially with finding a job, right? Because these are some similarities, but there are some differences, right? You can't have 4 serious girlfriends or boyfriend at the same time, or at least you shouldn't, right? But I just talked to a great young dentist who went interview who said he got 3 separate jobs that are all great. He went to the offices and met these dentists. But what it means is he got 3 jobs by putting himself out there. He probably went to 10 offices. He probably went to 20 job interviews. Dentists, unfortunately, I'll say to them things like, if you don't want to work on Saturdays, but it's a good job and the job, has Saturday hours, will you still go on the interview? And most dentists say no. And I say, that's the wrong answer. Go on the interview because something might happen where you are open to working Saturdays because it's so good. And I kind of use this with dating for me. Like I really wanted to have children. It was a big deal to me, right? So that would be a serious thing. But Jim Gaffigan, one of my favorite comedians, he's like, I'm an indoorsy person. That's kind of me, right? But if somebody I met was really cool, and they like to hike, I probably could get over that to some degree. So how about in your circle of friends, like their preconceived notions? How about going out of your comfort zone a little? Where do you see that, or any recommendations from your books?
I would say a lot of times people stress like you need to love the same things as your partner, but a lot of people find it's more you need to hate the same things.
Like that. Yeah.
So like I love like beach vacations. I like going on a vacation and like relaxing for a couple days. Yeah. I'm not the type to be like, let me do 2 weeks sightseeing, hopping around 100 places. I'm not we're up at 8 a.m., we're on the tour. And like a vacation with someone is a really true, like, are we compatible?
Right, I like that.
So I feel like you kind of have to dislike the same things. And it's also like, I don't know, with dating and even like life, like with that job, like working Saturdays, it's like, yeah, like you're brand new,
Right.
Like, and it's kind of like until you feel people out, it's going to be harder. You have to like work your way up to a comfort zone with someone,
For sure.
Or almost like, I feel like the first couple times maybe you meet someone's family, it's like, you got to be on, you got to be good energy. You got to be excited to be there. You got to go every time you're invited.
Right.
And that's almost like that Saturday thing is like, you're new here. So you're going to the 2-year-old birthday on Saturday with me.
Exactly.
You're my boyfriend.
Yeah.
Which it's like, then fast forward a couple years, it's like, they know you. You were a good sport all the time. You skip one, no one's going to say anything.
That's where now it's like, you're so right. Cause now I'm like, our husband's going and I'm like, please say no, please say no, please say no. My wife's like, no, they're not going. I'm like, great. And I think that's such a good point. And I also think a couple of things I want to share is like, I used to have these thoughts. I kind of wanted to write this book when I was single. Being single is not a disease, because people used to come up to me and be like, what is wrong with you? How come no one wants to be with you? I'm like, well, they did used to want to be with me. I'm just at this period of time where I'm open. But I actually didn't like that feeling because people would meet me. And, I think things have expanded since that time and a little bit more of like, okay, being single, but I don't like that part of it. But one of the things I said about dating, Erica, was dating is too much fun, right? You're eating appetizers, you're getting drinks, you might go to a comedy club. I would do it with anyone. Like, and I'm kind of repurposing some content I had heard back then where it's like, it should be like doing laundry, getting Chinese takeout on Tuesday night to see if you're compatible. Okay. And with the job thing, I recommend go observe at the office because people are going to show their true self. So when you're sitting next to a dentist having Starbucks, they can say anything, just like a first date. But if you could go observe them, like in their habitat, being a dentist, you're going to see if they yell at the staff. You're going to see what they do. And you're going to get a sense, am I a fit here or not? Is there a version of that in dating? Because I think you guys made a good point today where she was asking, are you my boyfriend, right? 90 days in. It was like a 90-day review. And he gave a vaguish answer.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about that. From the first date to maybe something more serious, how are you guys identifying when you get to that stage?
Well, like in relationships, there's always a honeymoon phase. And it's kind of like, it's very easy to be on your best behavior. And most of the books or scientific research we found are like, yeah, it's about 3 months. After 3 months is when people kind of can't keep up the charade anymore. Yeah. And you're going to like really start seeing aspects of them that are true and their real self. It's like when reality TV, when they film, it's like they film a 12-hour day
right.
for an hour show. And it's like each scene is only 20 minutes. And it's like, because the first 20 minutes, everyone is being cautious because cameras are there. And then you kind of forget. So it's the same thing of like observing, like being in the back of a classroom or being in the dentist office. You're like, at first people are like, who's that? And then they kind of forget you're there. And then you see the realness. But in the beginning, when you said dating is fun, I'm like, that is the classic male perspective. For men, dating is very fun. And then the relationship is the work. And for women, the dating is the work because it's this whole, he's got to pick me. We don't get to do the picking. So then for us, the relationship is like the fun time or like the vacation, as some people say.
I love all that. And I actually had a note as we, I want to do more segments with you. We'll wrap up in about 10 minutes, but I had a note that I want to say was, I think there's so Seinfeld, they say what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And Seinfeld's like, what's a gander anyway? Right. I always love that. So what I think is a little messed up, and I think this fits with a dentist and associate, could be your dad and his new associate, could be a man and a woman, a man and a man, a woman and a man. There's this weird thing where it's like, what you said was the man thinks it's fun to date and the woman's like trying out for this thing. But then some weird switch flips where I feel both people should feel lucky and annoyed by the person they're with, both dating, marriage, and jobs. I mean, this is what I mean. People make me feel a lot of times like I'm so unworthy of being married to my wife, right? Like I am so lucky she has picked me, right? So I think this weird, and I actually think it's toxic, right? And sometimes I was saying yesterday, I was like, my wife wakes up every day and says, I'm so lucky to have met you. Like, she never says this, but I think there is a weird switch flipping where then sometimes the husband has to be like this doofus, right? And like, people are like, what I despise when I got married, people gave me this advice, and I know it's well-meaning, and I know it's not even true, and I know it's a catchphrase, but they said, just learn to say, yes, dear, whatever you want. Yes, dear, whatever you want. And I say, that's like a terrible way to be in a relationship. So I don't know, does that make any sense to you? That kind of like angle?
This all stems from like, men always want to marry someone that's out of their league. And for women, we have more stress on physical attractiveness than men do. Men have stress on their jobs, their success, their career. And women, it's physical. Like, because men kind of think like, okay, it's my job to provide. And they don't look at a woman kind of like, well, what's your job? How much do you make? Could I have kids with you? Like men more feel, if I can't afford to have kids, we can't have kids kind of dynamic. So I mean, I would be very interested to talk to like a female dentist that was very successful about dating, because especially if they were single, because I've even felt this, and I'm not largely successful like on the level of dentistry money wise, but I've been in scenarios where like I'll get a great gig or I'll get some success and I want to like spend a little money and have someone to share it with. And a lot of times guys will not let you treat them in any way.
That's an interesting thing to bring up.
And then you're kind of like, well, now you're bringing it down for me. Like, I worked hard to get this thing and I want to share it with you. And why can't you just enjoy it with me? But like, if they can't afford the plane ticket there, they won't even let you buy it with like your miles points or something.
Right.
Like,
yeah. I've seen those things happen.
Pride. Yeah. So
these gender norms, and maybe they're even more as gender evolves, maybe it's just more role norms. And I see where you're coming from. And I think one of the things I can share from female dentists. So what I think is cool is your dad's generation, even my generation, predominantly male dentists. My generation of dental school had 50-50 women, but a lot of times they don't become practice owners at the same rate for normal reasons, have children, want to work as associates. But now we are getting more and more. And one of the dynamics that's challenging out there that I bring consultants in to help people with is, listening to a female practice owner is different than listening to a male practice owner. There's different friction that's involved. And largely, dental offices are set up like, I don't know if you're a Game of Thrones fan, but, these king and queens of castle things where, they have people working for them. And it's not as easy for female associates and female dentists to exert kind of what goes circling back to the, women, why men love bitches. And you guys really dug into that word in a real way, because it might be standing up for yourself. It might say, hey, that's not cool, right? It might be setting expectations. So I think this whole world is really meshed together.
Already when you made like the kids comment, I'm like, has anyone ever asked you like, man, how do you balance your job and kids? Right. And that's the number one question people ask any woman that has a job. And it's like, okay, you're automatically assuming that the children are my responsibility and not like my partner's responsibility as well. And it's also the saying of like, behind every great man is a really great woman, and women are better at being the cheerleader. They're better at like, you're like, I want to open this practice, and it's more likely the wife will go, I support you 100% and I'll take the brunt work of whatever you need me to do. Whereas a lot of times with men, if the woman is in the driver's seat and says, I want to open my own practice, like, but I'm going to need you to take care of the kids full time and like be on call if like I need you to bring something to my office. Like a lot of men are like, that doesn't make me feel valued. That doesn't make
One of the things I'll say, you're bringing such great value to this conversation, which I know our audience will listen to. Your purpose is like, we talk about treatment plans in dentistry. We make like a plan for your teeth. And also I know you were basketball, players. So there's game plans, right? There's game plans. And what I would encourage people to do, whether it's dating or job, especially as someone who does this Dr. Nacho thing, create a game plan for your family life, because you can't necessarily have two people owning two businesses, because businesses are like children, right? That don't love you back. So you might have children at home, and so there needs to be, not everybody can just dunk in basketball. Someone has to pass it to the person to dunk. And it's just a really great point you bring up, that these conversations and topics should be thought about. Because just last night on our giant group, we were talking about dentists are reluctant to move for a job. I understand. I didn't want to leave my friends and family. So you live in Queens. If there's a great stand-up comedy position, Erica, in Nebraska, but you have to live there for the next 5 years, you'd be like, I might just try to find a good one here. And that's what happens a lot. And some people say my wife can't move or my husband can't move. And one of the things I think this pandemic has taught us is maybe one person in a relationship needs a portable job, because if two people have non-portable jobs, the team can be a problem. And that fits with dating too, because if you're dating a dentist or sometimes just a entrepreneur person who can't move their location, right? You can't just pick up the dental practice. And I think maybe that'll be a podcast of you, how to make a good game plan when things got this serious. Like maybe you can give us a preview. Your co-host has a relationship now. How's that going for her?
It's going really good. And they kind of have this balance of they both work a lot. So even with like your natural communication patterns, a lot of people are kind of like, what do you mean you don't talk to your boyfriend every day? Right. Like type of thing, and she's kind of like, no, a lot of times it's like end of the day, maybe we'll talk on the phone for like 10 minutes, catch up. Like when they both have busy days, and she's like, I get that. He understands that for me. And so for everybody, they have kind of different needs. Like for a lot of couples, say you both work. I mean, most couples, both people work. And if one person typically works later than the other, some people might not like that. They might be like, well, I want to come home to our apartment and you're there. I don't like that, you don't get home till a certain time. And in all those scenarios of like, whether you're owning your own practice or you want to move, and what's really hard, whether you're man, woman, it's like, look, if your partner says to you like, hey, I have this great job opportunity, I can make more than both of us combined if I take it, but you got to leave your job and move. It's like, look, what matters more than money or like my own self-value and my own happiness? Like I like my job and I like working
for sure
thing, or just social life. Like there's so many aspects, but it's kind of like the classic old school way would be if one person's working, it's like, you got to follow them wherever they go. But now that it's a lot of two income households.
Yeah, and it's unfair. It's unfair to put those, what I always say is like I would not be on a date and want to go hang gliding. So like, I wouldn't want to be up at the hang gliding, about to hang glide and be like, now I'm going to tell you I don't like hang gliding. Yeah. I would make it clear that along the way, that would not be an acceptable date for me. I think a lot of times people filter their thoughts or whatever you call it. They don't say it. And then they get to the moment of hang gliding and they say, I don't want to do it. But sometimes you can't unwind it, right? Because you might have had children, you might be in a spot. So I think, I know you're a communications major, I think you guys are doing such a great thing with this podcast of bringing these issues to light. As we wrap up, tell us again how people can listen to your podcast or see you perform on Zoom or in person and follow you.
So you can listen to my podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. It's called Shooters Gotta Shoot. If you look it up, we have a website, shootersgottashoot.com. On Instagram, Shooters Gotta Shoot Pod. And my personal Instagram and all social media is at Sperica with 2 A's,
cool.
SPERICAA. And ericaspera.com. You can find me on everything.
Awesome. Well, I love what you shared. Now you're the most favorite Sparrow, and your dad has gone to number 2. So Awesome Dental Nachos. We'll be back to learn about Job Connect. Just text JOB to 215-543-6454 or visit dentalnachos.com. Thanks so much, Erica.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Cool.
Good.